The morning Zachary Kline found the woman half buried in snow at his gate, he thought she was already dead. February 1878 had been brutal in Colorado, the worst winter Westcliff had seen in a decade, and he had grown accustomed to finding frozen cattle on his property. But this was no animal. This was a young woman, her dark hair matted with ice, her lips blue, her skin the color of old parchment. He dropped to his knees beside her, pressing his weathered fingers against her throat despite the cold burning his bare skin. There, beneath the frozen surface, he felt it. A pulse. Faint, irregular, barely there but present. Without thinking, Zachary scooped her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, her body rigid and cold as marble. He ran toward the house, his boots slipping on packed snow, his breath coming in clouds of white vapor. The wind screamed across his 200 acres, cutting through his wool coat like a knife. He kicked open the door to his cabin and carried her straight to the fireplace, laying her on the bearskin rug he kept before the hearth. His hands shook as he built up the fire, throwing log after log onto the flames until the heat became almost unbearable. He knew the dangers of warming someone too quickly, but leaving her as she was meant certain death. Zachary knelt beside her and began removing her wet clothes, trying not to think about the impropriety of it all, focusing only on survival. Her dress was torn, her boots nearly falling apart, and underneath she wore only thin undergarments that offered no protection against the Colorado winter. He wrapped her in every blanket he owned, then in the thick quilts his mother had made before she passed. Still, the woman did not stir. He heated water on the stove and brought it over in a basin, using cloths to gently warm her hands and feet, being careful not to rub the skin. He had seen frostbite before, had lost 2 fingers on his left hand to it when he was 17. The woman's fingers were white and waxy, her toes the same. He worked methodically, changing the cloths every few minutes, gradually increasing the temperature of the water. Hours passed. The sun crossed the sky outside, casting long shadows through the windows. Still, she did not wake. As darkness fell, Zachary finally saw her eyelids flutter. He leaned closer, his heart pounding. Her lips parted and a small breath escaped, then another. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused and confused. They were gray, the color of storm clouds, and filled with such fear that Zachary instinctively raised his hands. "You are safe," he said, keeping his voice low and gentle. "I found you at my gate. You were freezing. You understand me." Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the rough timber walls, the simple furniture, the fire crackling in the hearth. She tried to sit up, but her body would not obey. A sound escaped her throat, half whimper, half gasp. "Do not try to move yet," Zachary said. "You have been unconscious for hours. Your body needs time." He reached for a cup of warm broth he had prepared. "Can you drink?" She stared at him for a long moment, and he saw her weighing her options, deciding whether to trust him. Finally, she gave a small nod. He slid his arm beneath her shoulders, lifting her just enough to bring the cup to her lips. She drank slowly, wincing as the liquid went down. After a few sips, she turned her head away. "What is your name?" Zachary asked. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. She tried again, and this time he heard a whisper so faint he had to lean in. "Thea, Thea," he repeated. "I am Zachary Kline. This is my ranch about 5 miles outside Westcliff. How did you come to be at my gate?" Tears filled her eyes and she shook her head. He did not press. Whatever had brought her here, it had nearly killed her. There would be time for questions later if she survived, and survival was still uncertain. Her breathing remained shallow, her skin still too pale. He spent the night beside her, adding logs to the fire, checking her pulse, watching for any sign of worsening condition. Twice she woke screaming from nightmares, thrashing against the blankets, and he had to gently restrain her until she calmed. By morning, she had developed a fever. Zachary cursed under his breath as he felt her burning forehead. He had hoped to avoid this, but infection or pneumonia seemed inevitable given her exposure. He rode into town despite the fresh snow, making the journey to fetch Doc Pritchard, who grumbled about the weather but came without hesitation when Zachary mentioned finding a woman half frozen. The doctor examined Thea while Zachary waited outside, pacing the porch despite the cold. When Pritchard emerged, his expression was grave. "She has got frostbite on 8 of her fingers and 6 toes. Might lose some of them, though I have seen worse heal up. The fever is my bigger concern. Her lungs sound congested. Next few days will tell us whether she makes it." "What do I need to do?" Zachary asked. "Keep her warm but not hot. Get fluids in her whenever she can drink. There is medicine in this packet to help with the fever. Mix it with water, give her a spoonful every 4 hours." Pritchard handed him a small wrapped bundle. "And Zachary, someone ought to know who she is. She might have family looking for her. She said her name is Thea. That is all I know. When she is more lucid, try to learn more. If she is someone's wife, there will be hell to pay if you are found harboring her." The doctor climbed onto his horse, adjusting his hat against the wind. "I will come back in 3 days unless you fetch me sooner." Zachary returned inside to find Thea's eyes open, watching him. "The doctor says you will recover," he told her, "but you need to rest and let the medicine work." "Why?" Her voice was stronger now, though still hoarse. "Why are you helping me? Would you rather I left you in the snow? You do not know me. I could be dangerous. I could be a criminal. Are you?" She looked away. "No. Then that is settled." He pulled a chair close to the fire and sat down. "I am not going to hurt you, Thea. I am not going to turn you out, but I would like to know what brought you to my gate in the middle of a blizzard." For a long moment she said nothing. Then, in a voice thick with emotion, she began to speak. "I was running from my uncle. After my parents died of cholera last fall, he became my guardian. He had debts, terrible debts, and he sold me to a man named Vernon Cross to settle them. Cross owns a saloon in Denver, but he does not just serve drinks there." Her voice broke. "I heard the women who work for him talk. I knew what he intended for me, so I ran." Zachary felt anger rise in his chest. He had heard of men like Cross, men who trafficked in human misery. "How did you get here from Denver?" "I stowed away on a supply wagon heading south. When the driver discovered me, he threw me out. That was 3 days ago, I think. I have been walking since then, hiding in barns at night, trying to stay warm. I knew I could not make it much farther, but I kept going anyway because going back was worse than dying." She met his eyes. "Then I saw your gate, and I thought maybe I could rest there for just a moment. That is the last thing I remember." "You would have died within the hour if I had not found you," Zachary said quietly. "Perhaps that would have been better. Do not say that." He stood and moved to the stove, ladling hot soup into a bowl. "You are alive, and you are going to stay that way. Cross has no claim on you here. You were sold against your will. That is not legal, no matter what your uncle says. Legal does not matter to men like Cross. He will look for me. He paid good money, my uncle said, $50. Her voice was bitter. "That is what I am worth." "You are worth a hell of a lot more than $50, Zachary said, bringing her the soup. "And Cross can look all he wants. He will not find you here, and if he does, he will not take you." Over the following days, Thea's fever worsened before it broke. Zachary slept in the chair by the fire, waking every few hours to give her medicine, to help her drink water, to change the cold compresses on her forehead. She drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid, sometimes calling out for her mother in a voice that broke his heart. He learned that her full name was Thea Morrison, that she had been 19 years old just last month, that her parents had run a small dry goods store in Denver before the cholera took them. She had one brother who died as a child, and her uncle was her only living relative. On the fourth night, her fever finally broke. Zachary woke to find her looking at him, truly seeing him for the first time. "You have been taking care of me this whole time," she said, not a question but a statement. "Yes. You should not have. You should have taken me to town, left me at the doctor's office or the church. I did what I thought was right. But now I am your responsibility. You are stuck with me." Zachary rubbed his face, feeling the rough stubble on his cheeks. He had not shaved since finding her, had barely left her side. "You are not my responsibility unless you want to be. When you are well enough, I will take you wherever you want to go. You can go to the church in town, or I can arrange passage to somewhere else. California, maybe, or south to New Mexico. You have choices, Thea. What if I have nowhere to go? Then you stay here until you figure it out." She studied him with those storm cloud eyes, and he found himself unable to look away. There was strength in her face despite the illness, despite everything she had endured. He could see it in the set of her jaw, the way she held herself even when lying wrapped in blankets on his floor. "Who are you, Zachary Kline?" she asked softly. "Just a rancher trying to make a living on this land. No family, my parents are both gone. Father died 10 years ago when a horse kicked him. Mother followed 2 years later. I have a sister in St. Louis, but we have not spoken in years. This ranch is all I have. Then we are both alone." Something in the way she said it made his chest tighten. He stood abruptly, needing to move to break the strange connection forming between them. "You should rest. I am going to check on the livestock." Outside, the cold air hit him like a physical blow. He stood on the porch, breathing deeply, watching his breath frost in the moonlight. What was he doing? He had taken in a stranger, a woman running from dangerous men, and now he was starting to feel things he had no right to feel. She was vulnerable, hurt, dependent on him. Taking advantage of that would make him no better than the men she was running from. But when he returned inside an hour later, stamping snow from his boots, and saw her smile at him from the pile of blankets, he knew it was already too late. Something had taken root in his heart, something he could not name and did not want to examine too closely. As January turned to February, Thea grew stronger. The frostbite healed better than expected, though she lost the tip of one little finger and would carry scars on her toes. She could stand now, could walk around the cabin with help, and she insisted on making herself useful despite Zachary's protests. He would return from his morning chores to find her stirring a pot of stew on the stove, or mending his shirts, or sweeping the floor with determined concentration. She wore one of his mother's old dresses that he had dug out from a trunk, and though it was too large for her thin frame, it suited her better than the rags she had arrived in. They fell into a rhythm, a strange domesticity that Zachary found himself craving. She would have breakfast ready when he came in from feeding the animals. They would eat together, talking about nothing and everything. She told him about growing up in Denver, about learning to read from her mother, about the dreams she once had of becoming a school teacher. He told her about the ranch, about his hopes of expanding his herd, about the loneliness of these mountains in winter. And slowly, carefully, they began to learn each other. One evening in mid-February, after they had finished supper, Thea cleared her throat. "I have been here 2 weeks," she said. "I am stronger now. I should think about moving on, about finding work in town." Zachary felt his stomach drop. "Is that what you want?" "I cannot stay here forever. People will talk. Your reputation will suffer if word gets out that you are living alone with an unmarried woman." "I do not care what people say, but I do." She looked down at her hands. "You have done so much for me already. I will not let you sacrifice your good name." What if I asked you to stay? The words hung in the air between them. Thea's head snapped up, her eyes wide. What? Zachary set down his coffee cup, his heart hammering. Stay. Not as my responsibility, not as someone I rescued. Stay because I want you here. Because these past 2 weeks have been the best I have had in years. Because I wake up looking forward to seeing your face, and I go to sleep hoping tomorrow will be the same. Zachary, I know it is fast. I know you probably think I am crazy. Maybe I am. But I also know that I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. Thea stood, and for a moment he thought she was going to flee. Instead, she walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered landscape. Do you know what Vernon Cross said to my uncle when he bought me? He said I was an investment. That is what I was to him. Not a person, not someone with hopes and dreams, just something to be used and discarded. I would never, I know you would not. She turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. That is what terrifies me. You are good, Zachary. You are kind and decent, and you saved my life without asking anything in return. And now you are offering me more than I ever dreamed possible. But what if I am damaged? What if what almost happened to me has broken something inside me that can never be fixed? Zachary crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping just short of touching her. You are not broken. You are the strongest person I have ever met. You survived things that would have killed most people. You fought your way through a blizzard rather than submit to a life you did not choose. That is not broken, Thea. That is steel. She looked up at him, and he saw hope warring with fear in her expression. I am scared. So am I. What if Cross finds me? Then we face him together. What if I cannot be what you need? You already are. She laughed, a broken sound that was half sob. You barely know me. Then let me learn. Stay, Thea. Give this a chance. Give us a chance. For a long moment she did not speak. Then slowly she nodded. 1 month. Let me stay for 1 month and we will see where we are then. 1 month, Zachary agreed, though his heart sang with triumph. A month was enough. A month was everything. The days that followed were the happiest Zachary had known. Thea threw herself into life on the ranch with an enthusiasm that amazed him. She learned to gather eggs from the chickens without getting pecked, to milk the cow without spilling, to recognize when the horses needed water or feed. She asked endless questions about the cattle, about the land, about his plans for the ranch's future. And in the evenings, after chores were done and supper eaten, they would sit by the fire and talk for hours. One night, as March approached and the worst of the winter began to ease, Thea asked him about his scar. He had a long white line running from his right eyebrow into his hairline, something she had noticed from the beginning but never mentioned. I was 12, he said, touching the mark self-consciously. Tried to break a wild Mustang before he was ready. He threw me into a fence post. Laid my head open like a melon. Mother stitched me up with needle and thread from her sewing kit, cursing me the whole time for being a fool boy. Did you break the Mustang? 2 years later, once I learned some patience. He smiled at the memory. His name was Thunder, and he was the finest horse I ever owned. Died of old age 5 years back. I still miss him. You loved him. I did. Animals are easier to love than people sometimes. They do not lie or betray you. Their loyalty is pure. Thea was quiet for a moment. Is that why you live out here alone? Because people hurt you, partly, Zachary admitted. My father was a hard man, loving in his way but hard. He believed in tough lessons and tougher consequences. When I told him I wanted to expand the ranch, he laughed at me, said I was too soft, too dreamy. We fought about it the day before the horse kicked him. I never got to tell him he was wrong, or that I forgave him, or that I loved him despite everything. I am sorry. That is life, I suppose. We do not always get the endings we hope for. He looked at her across the fire. That is why I believe in taking chances when they come. Life is too short for regrets. Is that what I am to you? A chance? You are everything to me." The words were out before he could stop them, raw and honest. Thea's breath caught, and for a moment they simply stared at each other. Then she stood and walked around the fire, kneeling beside his chair. She took his scarred hand in both of hers, studying the missing fingers, the calluses, the lines that spoke of hard work and harder choices. "I have been thinking about something," she said quietly. "About what you said about wanting me to stay. And I realize that I do not want to leave, not after 1 month, not ever. But I need to know this is real, that you want me for who I am, not because you pity me or feel responsible for me." Zachary cupped her face with his good hand, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "I stopped feeling responsible for you weeks ago. Now I just feel crazy about you. Is that real enough? Kiss me," she whispered. "Kiss me so I know this is not a dream." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away, but she only tilted her face up to meet him. Their lips touched softly at first, tentative and sweet. Then Thea's hand slid up to his shoulders and the kiss deepened, becoming something more desperate, more needful. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "That felt pretty real to me," Zachary managed. Thea laughed, and the sound was full of joy. "Yes, yes, it did." They sat together by the fire that night, Thea curled against Zachary's side, his arm around her shoulders. They did not speak much, simply existed in the comfortable silence of two people who had found something unexpected and precious. Outside, the wind howled, but inside, they were warm and safe and together. The next morning, Zachary woke to find Thea already dressed and cooking breakfast. She turned when she heard him rise, and the smile she gave him was radiant. "Good morning." "Good morning," he replied, still half asleep but grinning like a fool. "I was thinking," she said as she flipped bacon in the pan, "about our situation, about what people in town will think." His smile faded. "Thea, I told you, let me finish." She held up a hand. "I have been here over a month now. We both know what is happening between us. And while I do not care what strangers think, I do care about protecting you and this ranch. So I have a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" "Marry me." Zachary nearly fell out of his chair. "What?" Thea turned fully to face him, her expression serious. "I know it seems sudden. I know people will say we barely know each other. But Zachary, I know enough. I know you are honorable and hardworking. I know you are kind to your animals and patient with me. I know that when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I want to see is your face. And I know that if Vernon Cross ever shows up here, I want to face him as your wife, not as some woman you took in out of charity. Thea." He stood and crossed to her, taking her hands. "Are you sure? Marriage is forever, or it should be." "I am sure. Are you?" He thought about it for all of 3 seconds. "Yes, God help me, yes." They were married a week later in the small church in Westcliff, with Doc Pritchard and his wife standing as witnesses. Thea wore a simple blue dress that they had bought from the general store, and Zachary wore his best suit, the one he had not touched since his mother's funeral. The ceremony was brief and practical, the minister clearly curious about the story behind this sudden union but too polite to ask. When Zachary slipped his mother's gold wedding band onto Thea's finger, her eyes filled with tears. "I promise to cherish you," he said, the words coming from his heart rather than any script. "I promise to protect you and stand beside you and never give you reason to regret this choice." "I promise to be your partner," Thea replied, her voice steady despite the tears. "I promise to work alongside you and support your dreams and love you with everything I have." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary kissed her with all the pent-up emotion of the past weeks, and she kissed him back with equal fervor. The small congregation that had gathered clapped politely, and Doc Pritchard clapped Zachary on the shoulder with a knowing grin. They spent their wedding night in the cabin that was now truly their home. Zachary built up the fire until the room glowed with warmth, and they shared a simple supper of bread and cheese and the apple pie that Mrs. Pritchard had sent home with them. After the meal, as Thea cleared the dishes, Zachary found himself uncharacteristically nervous. "I know this is fast," he said. "If you need time before we—" "That is, I do not expect." Thea turned to face him and there was mischief in her eyes. "Zachary Kline, are you trying to tell me you will wait to consummate our marriage?" "I am saying I will wait as long as you need." She crossed the room and took his hands, placing them on her waist. "I married you because I want to be your wife in every way. I am not afraid of you. I am not afraid of this. Show me what it means to be loved by a good man." He did. Gently, carefully, he showed her. And later, as they lay tangled together in his bed with the firelight casting dancing shadows on the walls, Thea whispered against his chest, "Thank you." "For what?" "For finding me. For saving me. For loving me. Thank you for letting me." As March gave way to April and the snow began to melt, revealing the brown grass and muddy earth beneath, life on the ranch shifted into the busy rhythm of spring. Zachary spent his days repairing fences damaged by the winter, checking on the cattle as they prepared to give birth, and planning for the season ahead. Thea worked alongside him, proving herself capable and willing to tackle any task. She learned to ride his gentlest horse, a mare named Daisy, and soon was checking on the herd with him. She helped deliver 3 calves, her hands steady even when the process turned difficult. And every evening they returned home together, tired and dirty and happier than either had thought possible. They had been married 6 weeks when trouble arrived. Zachary was working on the barn roof, replacing shingles that had blown off during a spring storm, when he saw the riders approaching. 3 men on horseback, moving with purpose toward the cabin. Something about the way they carried themselves set off warning bells in his mind. He climbed down from the roof quickly and went to intercept them before they reached the house. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he called out as they reined in their horses. The man in the center was well dressed for the frontier, wearing a fine wool coat and a hat that probably cost more than Zachary made in a month. His face was hard, his eyes cold. "I am looking for a girl, Thea Morrison. I was told she might be here." Zachary felt his blood run cold, but he kept his expression neutral. "Who is asking?" "My name is Vernon Cross. I own several businesses in Denver. Thea Morrison is my property, purchased legally from her guardian. I have the papers to prove it." He patted his coat pocket. "Now I am going to ask you again. Is she here?" "I do not know any Thea Morrison." Cross's eyes narrowed. "Do not play games with me, rancher. I have been tracking her for months. A woman matching her description was seen in Westcliff. The shopkeeper remembers her buying a dress just a few weeks back. She was with a man who paid for it. That was you, was it not?" "I bought my wife a dress, yes." "Your wife?" Cross laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Convenient. Marry her and claim she is yours." "But I have a prior claim, and it is legally binding. Her uncle signed her over to me in exchange for payment. That makes her my property." "A human being cannot be property," Zachary said, his voice hard. "And even if your papers were legal, which I doubt, she is my wife now. That supersedes any claim you might have. Show me your marriage certificate." "I do not have to show you anything. This is my land and you are not welcome here. I suggest you leave." One of the other men, a lean fellow with a scarred face, moved his hand toward his gun. "We are not leaving without the girl." Zachary had his own rifle leaning against the barn wall within reach if he moved fast. But before he could make a decision, Thea's voice rang out from the cabin porch. "Stop." All eyes turned to her. She stood straight and tall, Zachary's shotgun held competently in her hands, pointed directly at Cross. "I know what I am doing with this," she said calmly. "My father taught me to shoot when I was 10 years old. At this range, I will not miss." Cross's face flushed red. "Put that down, girl, before someone gets hurt. The only person getting hurt today will be you if you do not leave my husband's property." She emphasized the word husband, her voice sharp as a blade. "I did not choose to be sold to you. I never agreed to work in your establishment. And I certainly do not acknowledge any legal claim you think you have over me. I paid $50, which was a transaction between you and my uncle, not me. I was not a party to it. I did not sign anything. And even if I had, I was coerced, which makes any contract void." She took a step forward. "I am married now, Mr. Cross. Legally and properly married in the eyes of God and the law. Whatever papers you have are worthless. Now get off our land before I shoot you for trespassing." Cross looked between Thea and Zachary, rage and calculation warring on his face. Finally, he jerked his head toward his companions. "This is not over. That marriage is fraudulent, and I will prove it. When I do, I will be back with the law." "You do that," Zachary said, "and I will have a conversation with the sheriff about men who traffic in human beings. I imagine he will find that very interesting." The three men wheeled their horses around and rode off, kicking up mud as they went. Zachary waited until they were out of sight before turning to Thea. She was shaking now, the shotgun wavering in her grip. He gently took it from her and set it aside, then pulled her into his arms. "You were magnificent," he said into her hair. "I was terrified. So was I, but you stood your ground, you protected our home." She pulled back to look at him, tears streaming down her face. "What if he comes back? What if he makes trouble in town? Some people might believe his story, might think I am his property. Then we fight him with the truth. We have our marriage certificate. We have witnesses to the ceremony. And we have Doc Pritchard, who saw you when you first arrived and can testify to your condition. No judge will rule in Cross's favor, not when the facts are laid out." "You cannot be sure of that." "No," Zachary admitted. "But I am sure of this. I will not let him take you. I will fight him with everything I have, and if that is not enough, we will leave. We will go to California or Oregon or anywhere else he cannot find us. You are my wife, Thea. I will protect you." She buried her face against his chest and cried, great heaving sobs that spoke of fear and relief and love all tangled together. He held her until the tears stopped, until her breathing steadied, until she was ready to face the world again. That night, they talked seriously about their options. Zachary suggested they make a trip to the county seat in Cannon City to speak with a lawyer, to ensure their marriage was registered properly, and to file a complaint about Cross's harassment. Thea agreed, though the thought of traveling made her anxious. They decided to go the following week, giving them time to prepare and to arrange for a neighbor to watch the ranch while they were gone. But 2 days later, events took an unexpected turn. Sheriff Tom Burton rode up to the ranch, his expression apologetic. "Zachary, Thea, I need to speak with you both." They invited him inside, offering coffee that he accepted gratefully. He sat at their table, turning his hat in his hands. "Vernon Cross came to see me. He showed me papers claiming he purchased Thea from her uncle. He wants me to arrest her for theft of property." "Theft of herself?" Thea asked incredulously. "I know how it sounds," Burton said, "and I told him he was crazy, but he is threatening to make a formal complaint, and that means I would have to investigate. I wanted to hear your side of the story before things go any further." Thea told him everything, about her parents' death, about her uncle's debts, about being sold to Cross and running away. Zachary showed him their marriage certificate and gave him Doc Pritchard's name as a witness to her condition when she arrived. The sheriff listened carefully, taking notes. When they finished, he sighed. "I believe you, and I think any reasonable person would believe you. But Cross is rich, and rich men have ways of making trouble even when they are in the wrong. He has already hired a lawyer from Denver, and they are talking about taking this to the territorial court." "Can they do that?" Zachary asked. "They can try. Whether they would win is another matter. But trials are expensive and they take time. He might be hoping to wear you down, make you give up rather than fight." "I will never give up," Thea said firmly. "I would rather die than go back to him." "It will not come to that," Zachary said. He looked at the sheriff. "What do you suggest we do?" "Get your own lawyer. A good one. I know a man in Cannon City, James Drummond. He has handled cases like this before, fought against men who tried to claim ownership of people. If anyone can help you, it is him." "Then that is what we will do." The trip to Cannon City took 2 days. They left the ranch in the care of their neighbor, Bill Henderson, an older rancher who had been kind to them from the start. The journey was long and dusty, but Zachary drove the wagon steadily, and Thea sat beside him, watching the landscape change as they descended from the mountains into the valley. James Drummond was a tall, thin man with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. He listened to their story without interruption, then began asking questions, probing for details, building his case in real time. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "You have a strong case," he said. "No court in the land would uphold a sale of a human being against their will, especially one that was not party to the transaction. The problem is that Cross knows this, which means he is not really after a court victory. He is after something else." "What?" Thea asked. "Money. He wants you to pay him to go away. He will drag this out, make it expensive and painful, and then offer to drop everything if you pay him a settlement. It is extortion dressed up as legal action." "How much would he ask for?" Zachary wanted to know. "More than you have, I would guess. He knows you are a rancher. He will have looked into your assets. My guess is he will start at $200 and work his way up from there." Zachary felt his stomach sink. $200 was a fortune. It would take him years to save that much, and only if he had several good seasons in a row. "I do not have that kind of money." "Then we fight him in court and we win. It will take time and it will not be pleasant, but justice is on your side." Drummond smiled. "And I work for a percentage of your settlement when we countersue him for harassment and defamation, so I have every incentive to win big." "You think we can countersue?" Thea asked. "Oh, absolutely. He has slandered you, harassed you, and attempted to claim ownership of your person. When this is over, Vernon Cross is going to wish he had never heard the name Thea Kline." The use of her married name made Thea smile. "Then, let us fight." The case took 3 months to wind its way through the territorial court system. During that time, Zachary and Thea lived under a cloud of uncertainty, never knowing when the next court date would be or what Cross's lawyers would try next. But they also discovered a deep well of strength in each other and in their community. The people of Westcliff, who had been curious and somewhat skeptical about their sudden marriage, rallied around them once the details of Thea's story became known. Women brought food and offered support. Men showed up to help with the ranch work so Zachary could attend court proceedings. Even the minister who had married them wrote a letter to the judge, attesting to the validity of their union and the obvious love between them. Through it all, Zachary and Thea grew closer. The adversity they faced together only strengthened their bond. They learned to communicate without words, to anticipate each other's needs, to be partners in the truest sense. And on the nights when the stress became too much, when Thea woke crying from nightmares of Cross finding her or the court ruling against them, Zachary would hold her and remind her of the truth. They were stronger together than anything that could come against them. The trial itself was anticlimactic. James Drummond presented their case with precision and passion, calling witnesses who testified to Thea's condition when she arrived, to the legitimacy of their marriage, to the illegal nature of Cross's purchase. Cross's lawyer tried to argue that the uncle had legal authority to enter into contracts on his niece's behalf, but the judge quickly shut that down, pointing out that such authority did not extend to selling a person-like property. When the verdict came, it was swift and decisive. The judge ruled entirely in favor of Zachary and Thea, declaring Cross's claim null and void. Moreover, he ordered Cross to pay restitution for the harassment and legal fees, a sum of $500. Cross's face turned purple with rage as the judgment was read, but there was nothing he could do. The law had spoken. Outside the courthouse, Zachary swept Thea into his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing with relief and joy. James Drummond stood nearby, grinning. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Kline, you are free and clear." "Thank you," Thea said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for fighting for us. It was my pleasure. Now go home and live your lives. You have earned it." They returned to the ranch in early August, just as the summer heat was beginning to give way to cooler mountain air. The land had never looked more beautiful to Zachary, the grass green and thick, the cattle fat and healthy, the mountains rising purple in the distance. But more beautiful than any of it was the sight of Thea beside him, her face turned toward the sun, free at last from the shadow that had hung over them. As they pulled the wagon up to the cabin, Thea turned to him. "I have something to tell you." "What is it?" "I am pregnant." Zachary froze, his mind going blank. Then he looked at her, really looked, and saw the truth shining in her eyes. "Pregnant, are you sure?" "I suspected for a few weeks, but I did not want to say anything until after the trial. I did not want to give you one more thing to worry about." "But yes, I am sure. Doc Pritchard confirmed it yesterday while we were in town. We are having a baby." He said it slowly, testing the words, letting the reality of them sink in. Then a grin spread across his face, wide and unstoppable. "We are having a baby." He jumped down from the wagon and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the love and joy in his heart. She laughed against his lips, her arms wrapping around his neck. When they finally pulled apart, both were crying. "I love you," he said. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "I love you too. You saved my life, Zachary. You gave me a future when I thought I had none, and now we are going to have a family." "The first of many," he promised. The months that followed were the happiest of Zachary's life. He watched Thea's body change, saw the swell of her belly grow as their child developed inside her. He was protective to the point of being overbearing, constantly worrying that she was working too hard or doing something that might harm the baby. Thea tolerated his hovering with good humor, teasing him about being a mother hen. In November, as the first snows began to fall, Doc Pritchard made a house call to check on Thea's progress. He pronounced her healthy and said the baby should arrive around Christmas. "Perfect timing," he joked. "Your own little gift." "As long as both of them are healthy, that is all the gift I need," Zachary said. Thea went into labor on December 20th, just as a blizzard began to howl outside the cabin. Zachary rode through the storm to fetch Doc Pritchard, his heart in his throat the entire way. The doctor came without hesitation, and together they helped Thea through 18 hours of hard labor. Zachary held her hand, wiped her brow, whispered encouragement, and tried not to let her see how terrified he was. When the baby finally came, a lusty, crying boy with dark hair and gray eyes like his mother, Zachary wept openly. "He is perfect," he said, cradling the tiny bundle in his arms. "Absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Thea asked, exhausted but glowing. Zachary thought for a moment. "Thomas, after your father, Thomas Morrison Kline." "Yes," Thea whispered. "That is perfect." The years that followed were full and rich. Thomas grew into a sturdy, curious boy who loved following his father around the ranch. 2 years later, Thea gave birth to twin girls, Anna and Rose, who were as different as night and day but equally loved. The ranch prospered. Zachary expanded his herd and built a larger barn. They hired help during the busy seasons, young men from town who were glad for the work. And through it all, Zachary and Thea remained deeply, steadfastly in love. On their 5th anniversary, Zachary took Thea on a picnic to the spot where he had first found her, by the gate that had almost been her grave. They sat on a blanket under the spring sun, watching their children play nearby, and he took her hand. "You remember that morning?" he asked. "Every detail. I remember thinking I was going to die. I remember the cold seeping into my bones. And then I remember opening my eyes and seeing your face, and thinking I had already died and gone somewhere else. Somewhere else, heaven maybe, or some place beyond the pain, because you looked at me with such kindness, such concern. No one had looked at me that way in so long." "I thought you were dead," Zachary admitted. "When I first saw you, I was sure of it. Finding that pulse was like finding a miracle. You were my miracle." Thea leaned her head against his shoulder. "You gave me a life I never dreamed possible, a home, a family, love. All the things I thought were lost to me forever. You gave me the same. I was alone in that cabin, going through the motions, working hard, but for what? You gave me purpose. You made this ranch into a home." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Thomas try to catch grasshoppers while the twins picked wildflowers. The mountains rose around them, eternal and steadfast, and the sky stretched blue and endless above. It was a perfect moment, the kind that comes rarely in life, when everything aligns and you realize that despite the struggles and the pain, you have found exactly where you belong. "I would do it all again," Thea said suddenly. "Even knowing everything that would happen, all the fear and the running and the trial, I would do it all again to end up here with you. So would I. Every moment, every choice that led me to that gate on that morning, I would not change a thing." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they gathered their children and headed back to the cabin. Thomas rode on Zachary's shoulders, chattering about everything and nothing. The twins held Thea's hands, singing a nonsense song they had made up. And as Zachary looked at his family, at the woman who had collapsed frozen at his gate and the children she had given him, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. Life on the ranch continued to unfold with the rhythms of the seasons. Spring brought calving and planting. Summer brought long days of work under the hot sun. Fall brought harvest and preparation for winter, and winter brought quiet evenings by the fire with family. Through it all, Zachary and Thea built a life together that was ordinary in its details but extraordinary in its love. Thomas grew into a responsible young man who shared his father's love for the land. At 15, he could handle most ranch tasks as well as any adult. The twins, now 13, helped their mother with the household tasks and the large vegetable garden she had cultivated behind the cabin. They also had a younger brother, James, who was 7 and already showing signs of being the most adventurous of all the children. On a spring evening in 1893, 15 years after Thea had collapsed at the gate, the family gathered for supper. It had become tradition for them to eat together every night, no matter how busy the day had been. Zachary believed in the importance of family time, of sharing the day's stories and staying connected. "Pa," Thomas said as Thea passed the potatoes, "I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" Bill Henderson told me his ranch is going up for sale when he passes. He has no heirs, and he wants to know if we would be interested in buying it. It adjoins our property on the eastern side." Zachary glanced at Thea, who raised an eyebrow. They had done well over the years, saving money and investing wisely, but buying another ranch was a major decision. "That is a lot of land. It would nearly double our acreage," Thomas said, "and we could support a much larger herd. I could manage the eastern section, Pa. I am ready." "You are only 15. You were working this ranch alone when you were younger than that." It was true. Zachary had been barely 14 when his father died, and he had kept the ranch going through sheer determination and stubbornness. Looking at his son now, he saw that same determination reflected back at him. "Let me think about it, and let me talk to Henderson." "I think we should do it," Thea said. "Thomas is ready for more responsibility, and it would be a good investment for all the children." "You always were the practical one," Zachary said with a smile. "Someone has to be, with you being such a romantic." The children giggled at their parents' banter. It was a common occurrence in the Kline household, the gentle teasing that spoke of deep affection and mutual respect. That night, after the children were in bed, Zachary and Thea sat on their porch watching the stars emerge. It was something they had done countless times over the years, finding peace in the quiet of the evening and the comfort of each other's presence. "You think we should buy Henderson's ranch?" Zachary asked. "I think Thomas is ready for the challenge, and I think it would be good for the family." "But more importantly, what do you think?" Zachary considered. "I think I am proud of our son, and I think your parents would have been proud of you." Thea's eyes grew misty. She rarely spoke of her parents, though Zachary knew she thought of them often. They would have loved this life. "My father especially, he always wanted land of his own." "Then let us buy it in their honor, the Morrison Kline Ranch." "You would do that? Why not? Their legacy is part of this family just as mine is. It seems fitting." Thea leaned over and kissed him, soft and sweet. "Have I told you lately that I love you? Not in the last hour, at least." "Well, I do, more than anything." The purchase of Henderson's ranch happened that fall. Bill Henderson passed peacefully in his sleep, just days after the papers were signed, and Zachary was glad they had been able to give the old man peace about his land's future. Thomas took to managing the eastern section with enthusiasm and skill, proving himself more than capable. The ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful operations in the county. But more important than the financial success was the family's happiness. The Kline children grew up knowing they were loved, knowing they were part of something larger than themselves. They learned the value of hard work and the importance of integrity. And they saw, every day, what a strong marriage looked like in the example of their parents. Years continued to pass. Thomas married a sweet girl from town named Elizabeth and brought her to live on the ranch. They built a house on the eastern section and started their own family. The twins married as well, Anna to a doctor and Rose to a school teacher. Though they both stayed close to home, their husbands integrating into the ranch life. James, true to his adventurous nature, left to see the world when he turned 18, promising to return once he had satisfied his wanderlust. Through all of it, Zachary and Thea remained each other's constant. They grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies wearing the marks of hard work and long years. But the love between them never dimmed. If anything, it grew deeper, richer, tempered by time and trial into something unbreakable. On their 30th anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a celebration. The entire town of Westcliff seemed to turn out, filling the ranch with music and laughter. There was food enough to feed an army and dancing that lasted until the stars came out. And in the middle of it all, Zachary took Thea's hand and led her away from the crowd to a quiet spot overlooking the valley. 30 years, he said. Can you believe it? Some days it feels like yesterday. Other days it feels like we have always been together. You have any regrets? Thea looked at him as if he had grown a second head. Regrets? Zachary, you gave me everything. A home, children, a life I never could have imagined. How could I possibly have regrets? I know there have been hard times, winters when money was tight, children sick with fevers, work that never seemed to end. Sometimes I wonder if you would have been happier with an easier life. An easier life would have been a lesser life. This, right here, this is everything I ever wanted. You are everything I ever wanted. She cupped his face in her weathered hands. That morning you found me at your gate, frozen and dying. You did not just save my life. You gave me a reason to live. Every day since then has been a gift, and I treasure every single one. Zachary pulled her close, holding her as he had held her countless times before. I love you, Thea Kline. I loved you when I first saw you in the snow. I loved you when you stood on the porch with a shotgun protecting our home. I loved you when you gave me our children. And I will love you until the day I die and beyond. That is good, Thea said, her voice muffled against his chest, because you are stuck with me. They stood there as the sun set over their land, over the ranch they had built together, over the family they had created. Below them, the party continued, their children and grandchildren celebrating a love story that had begun with a woman frozen at a gate and a man who refused to let her die. It was a simple story in many ways, two people finding each other in the midst of hardship and choosing to build something beautiful. But it was also an extraordinary story, a testament to the power of love to transform and heal and create. As the years continued to pass, Zachary and Thea settled into the comfortable rhythms of old age. They left most of the heavy ranch work to their children and grandchildren, though Zachary still insisted on doing morning chores, and Thea still kept her garden. They took long walks together, reminisced about the past, and marveled at how their family had grown. James eventually returned from his travels with a wife from San Francisco, settling on a section of the ranch and adding his own children to the Kline legacy. On a cold December morning in 1908, 30 years and a month after he had first found her, Zachary woke to find Thea still asleep beside him. He lay quietly, watching her breathe, memorizing the lines of her face, the silver hair spread across the pillow, the peaceful expression she wore in sleep. At 72, he knew his time was growing shorter and he wanted to hold on to every moment. Thea's eyes opened and she smiled when she saw him watching her. Good morning, husband. Good morning, wife. How did you sleep? Like a stone, as always. She stretched, then snuggled closer to him. It is cold this morning. December usually is. Should I build up the fire? In a moment. For now, just hold me. He wrapped his arms around her, and they lay together in the quiet of early morning. Outside, they could hear the sounds of the ranch waking up. Thomas's voice calling to the ranch hands, grandchildren laughing, cattle lowing. It was the sound of life continuing, of the legacy they had built together carrying on. Zachary, Thea said softly, I want you to know something. Whatever happens, wherever life takes us from here, these years with you have been the greatest blessing of my life. You turned a tragedy into a triumph. You took a frozen, dying woman and gave her a reason to live, to love, to become more than she ever dreamed possible. You did the same for me. I was going through the motions before you came. Now every day has meaning. They stayed in bed longer than usual that morning, talking about everything and nothing, simply enjoying each other's presence. When they finally rose and dressed, they found the house full of family. It had become tradition for everyone to gather at the main house on Sunday mornings for breakfast. A chaotic, joyful affair that filled the cabin with noise and love. As Zachary watched his children and grandchildren, 17 souls in total, crowded around the expanded table that had been added onto over the years, he felt a profound sense of completion. This was what life was about. Not just surviving, but thriving. Not just existing, but truly living. And all of it had started with a choice to stop at his gate on a frozen February morning, to check what he thought was a dead body, to refuse to let death claim one more victim to the harsh Colorado winter. The decades rolled on, bringing both joy and sorrow. Zachary and Thea lost friends to age and illness, said goodbye to the last of their generation. But they also welcomed great-grandchildren, saw their ranch become one of the most respected in Colorado, and knew the satisfaction of a life well lived. They grew old together, their bodies failing but their love remaining strong. In the spring of 1918, 40 years after their first meeting, Zachary fell ill. It started as a cough, nothing serious, but it settled into his chest and would not leave. Doc Pritchard's son, who had taken over his father's practice, came to examine him and delivered the news gently. Pneumonia, and at Zachary's age, recovery was uncertain. Thea refused to leave his side. She set up a cot next to their bed and slept there, waking at every sound to check on him. She coaxed him to eat, gave him his medicine, read to him from the newspapers and books he loved. Their children took turns visiting, sitting with their father, sharing memories and expressing their love. On a quiet evening in late April, with spring rain falling softly outside and Thea holding his hand, Zachary opened his eyes and looked at his wife. "I am not afraid," he said, his voice weak but clear. "I know you are not. You have never been afraid of anything. I am only sorry to leave you." "You are not leaving me. Not really. You will always be with me in every corner of this ranch, in every child and grandchild we created, in every sunrise over these mountains. Promise me something, anything. Promise me you will keep living, that you will not just wait for your turn to die. Keep working your garden, keep telling our grandchildren stories, keep loving this life we built. I promise." Tears streamed down her face, but her voice was steady. "I promise I will live every day to the fullest, just like you taught me. I love you, Thea. Finding you was the best thing that ever happened to me. Saving me was the best thing that ever happened to me. Thank you, my love. Thank you for everything." He smiled then, the same smile that had greeted her on that frozen morning 40 years ago, full of kindness and strength. "The pleasure," he whispered, "was entirely mine." His eyes closed and his breathing slowed. Thea held his hand through the night, talking to him, singing the songs he loved, reminding him of all the beautiful moments they had shared. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Zachary Kline took his last breath with his wife's hand in his and his family surrounding him. The funeral was held on a beautiful spring day, the kind Zachary had always loved. It seemed like the entire county turned out to pay their respects to a man who had been respected, admired, and loved by all who knew him. He was buried on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a cottonwood tree he had planted himself 40 years earlier. True to her promise, Thea did not simply wait to die after Zachary's passing. She mourned him deeply, feeling his absence like a physical pain, but she also celebrated his life and the legacy they had built together. She continued to tend her garden, to spend time with her family, to live fully even in her grief. She told stories about Zachary to anyone who would listen, keeping his memory alive and vibrant. She lived another 6 years, remaining active and engaged until the very end. On a December morning in 1924, she passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 86. Her children found her looking peaceful, a small smile on her face, and they knew she had gone to join her husband. She was buried next to Zachary under the cottonwood tree, and on her headstone were inscribed the words, "Beloved wife, mother, and grandmother, she came to us in winter and brought us spring." The ranch continued to thrive under the management of their descendants. The story of how Zachary found Thea frozen at the gate became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. It was a story of love and rescue, of choosing life over death, of two people who found each other against impossible odds and built something beautiful that lasted far beyond their own lifetimes. Decades later, when the great-great-grandchildren of Zachary and Thea stood by those graves under the cottonwood tree, they would see the two headstones side by side and know that this was what love looked like. Not just the passion of youth, but the steady, enduring choice to stand beside someone through every season of life. To save each other, not just once, but over and over again in 1,000 small ways. The ranch still bore their name, the Kline Ranch, a testament to two families joined by love and tragedy and triumph. The land they had worked so hard to build up continued to flourish, generation after generation adding their own chapters to the story while honoring those who had come before. And sometimes, on cold February mornings when the snow fell soft and thick, ranch hands swore they could see two figures walking together by the old gate. An elderly man and woman, hand in hand, checking the property one more time. They would vanish when approached, but their presence brought comfort rather than fear. It was as if Zachary and Thea were still watching over the land they loved, still walking together through the seasons, still proving that true love never really dies. The legacy they left behind was not measured in acres or cattle or money, though they had been successful in all those things. Their true legacy was in the love they shared, the family they created, and the example they set for what marriage and partnership could be. They had shown that love could triumph over circumstance, that kindness and determination could transform tragedy into joy, and that the choice to save one frozen woman at a gate could ripple outward to touch hundreds of lives across generations. In the hearts of their descendants, in the stories told around dinner tables, in the very soil of the land they had worked together, Zachary and Thea Kline lived on. Their love story, which began with a desperate woman collapsing in the snow and a rancher who refused to let her die, became the foundation upon which an entire family built their lives. It was a reminder that the most profound moments often come when we least expect them, and that the choice to act with compassion and love can change not just one life, but many. The 60 days Zachary spent nursing Thea back to health had blossomed into 60 years of love, partnership, and shared dreams. What started as a simple act of human decency had grown into something extraordinary, a testament to the power of love to heal, to transform, and to endure. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy of all. Proof that love, real love, the kind built on mutual respect and shared hardship and daily choices to honor and cherish each other, could overcome anything. Even a frozen Colorado morning that should have been the end of one woman's story, instead, became the beginning of something beautiful that would last for generations. The last surviving grandchild of Zachary and Thea, a woman named Margaret who had been especially close to her grandmother, preserved their letters and journals, creating a detailed account of their life together. These documents were eventually donated to the Colorado Historical Society, where they became valuable records of frontier life and a love story that captured the imagination of historians and romantics alike. In those pages, future generations could read Zachary's account of finding Thea, his worry during her illness, his growing love for her. They could read Thea's words about awakening in a stranger's cabin, about learning to trust again, about falling in love with a man who had saved her life in every possible way. The story was remarkable not because it was dramatic or extraordinary in the conventional sense, but because it was real. Two ordinary people who had found each other in extraordinary circumstances and built an ordinary, beautiful life together. And so the story of Zachary Kline and Thea Morrison Kline lived on, a beacon of hope and love in a world that often seemed short on both. It reminded people that heroes were not always those who won battles or conquered nations. Sometimes heroes were ranchers who stopped to check on what they thought was a frozen body. Sometimes heroes were women who refused to give up even when death seemed certain. And sometimes the greatest victories were not won on battlefields but in quiet moments of choosing love, choosing life, choosing each other over and over again, until death finally parted them. And even then, not really, because true love transcends even that final separation.